So before we dig into the details, I think it's important to understand the difference between utility equity and co-op patronage capital. So maybe some of you have come from the co-op universe over to a utility or vice versa. And really, it is important to understand how a municipal utility and public power equity works and why it's different. And if you're a municipal utility, a lot of your neighbors are probably co ops, and maybe you've heard about patronage capital and refunds and things like that. But let's look at the differences in this short segment here. In a utility, municipal utility, we're talking about, not investor owned, in a municipal utility or a public power utility, there is not patronage capital, but the equity or retained earnings that you have still matters a great deal. Now, in a co op, you have what's called member equity and patronage capital. So, co ops are owned by their members, and each member actually has an account at the co op year by year and member by member that shows what their share of co op ownership is. There's a formula after you calculate the income of the co op, they call it the net margin, and there's an allocation process based on the kilowatt hours that each member uses from the co-op in that particular year. Now, if a member leaves the cooperative, their equity doesn't go with them, but it still stays on the books of the co-ops. And then from time to time, co-ops have a patronage capital retirement program where they will pay what's called capital credits to the members based on their contribution to a particular year's net margin. Now, that's different from a municipal utility. In a municipal utility, your owners are the ratepayers still, but the excess revenues above the cost become retained earnings, or on your financial statements, you'll see it as net position. So this belongs to the municipality. If you're a municipal utility, you're an enterprise fund of the municipality, or if you're a standalone public power agency, you have these retained earnings. So there are no individual customer equity accounts, no obligation to return it, but you take that equity and you invest it in the business. In a co-op, you also do the same thing, but there still is a slice of net margin that does belong to the co-op members. So that doesn't mean that these excess revenues that you generate in a utility are free to spend. You still have to have a policy to develop and hold back some of those funds to build strong reserves. And what this gives you, like any business, is maneuverability in tougher times, rate making ability to accelerate or forego rate increases for certain periods based on your capital investment, operating expenses, and so on. And the difference is that the decision on how to use retained earnings is made by management and the governing board, not driven necessarily by member equity obligations. So circling back to this net position or retained earnings, if you look at your financial statements, you'll see this on the liability side of the statements on a two-page statement. This is on the right side, okay? Well, down at the bottom, you'll see retained earnings, and it comes in three flavors. The first flavor is net investment in capital assets. Basically, this shows the part of your utility system that you don't owe to debt holders. There's a formula that you go through. You basically take the net value of your plant and service minus debt outstanding on that net plant and service, and that gives you your net investment in capital assets. So this is in cash. You can't spend this. It just shows ownership. Then you have restricted net position. Restricted net position are reserves that you hold to fulfill mainly debt obligations. Debt obligations require you to set aside funds for debt reserve payments, set aside special accounts to make sure that the bondholders are paid. These are restricted assets. They're cash, but you can't spend them in operations or for capital improvements. And that leaves us with unrestricted net position, which is really the retained earnings of the organization. And it really isn't necessarily all cash. It is truly the running total of your gains and losses since you opened the doors for business when you first became a utility. But it is the reinvested component of earnings in the utility, and it will represent a value of some of the cash that you have available to spend for operations, capital improvements, and also rate stabilization. So other types of reserves that you can set up for that. So a healthy utility maintains a positive and growing unrestricted net position. And so you'll see these on the statement of net position right with the liability section of your financial statements. So utility equity does not have a return obligation, but it has great strategic value. I think the biggest strategic value that you have with that equity is the bond rating agencies will review that to see how that meshes with your cash reserves policies and how you have the ability to weather sensitive political environments. Your boards will turn over from time to time, city councils as well. Sometimes it'll be easier to raise rates and others not so easy. But you have to have the ability to fund a portion of your capital improvements without rate increases and without issuing debt as well. So having strong reserves, strong equity isn't really overcharging customers. It's really good stewardship of what you have that protects every future customer that the utility will serve.